Welcome back to the channel. Today I can't leave well enough alone, so we are going to start the second tier of our retaining wall. So with that, let's get into it. Alright, so unlike the first tier, we are not going to be putting a concrete footing here, which means we have to dig a trench out to put some gravel in so that the water can drain underneath the wall. Now the two problems we have is first, you can see that this is not a straight line, it kind of goes back and forth along the entire thing, so we're going to have to straighten that out. And the second issue, which is something I mentioned previously, is that there is a whole lot of rocks and rock ledge underneath this sand, and that problem gets more and more apparent as we get closer to the back corner of the yard where those two fences meet. But in a case like this, you don't know what you don't know, and the only way to figure it out is to get started. To begin, I let my dogs do a nice thorough sniff of the full area to make sure there were no hidden explosives that I missed, and once I was assured that the area was cleared, I started by trying to make the straight reference line that we're going to use to dig this entire trench. What I'm going to do is set up two stakes in the back of the yard. They're going to be equally spaced from this front wall, so that way it's nice and straight the whole way across. If this wall goes in or out to any extent, the end product's probably not going to look great because we can see it referenced off that first wall, and something like that is going to be visually pretty obvious. But after spending a little bit of time, I really dialed in the measurements and I got those stakes with the string set up for my reference line, and then I was ready to start digging. And I started in this back corner where I thought the rocks were going to be the worst, because quite frankly, if everything else on the left side of the screen here is really easy to do, it doesn't matter if I can't line it up on this side of the yard because this is where there's more rocks. So basically this back corner on the right was going to be my biggest limitation, so that is why I started there. So with that, let's jump into the two biggest issues I very quickly ran into. Issue number one was the vegetation. I was hitting a lot of roots, and I mean a lot of roots. Specifically, the thorn bush that had hints of red that was absolutely a nightmare to try to get rid of last year. There were still roots from that were absolutely thriving, and you can see here they were not small. Some of these were 2 to 3 inches thick. So basically a couple feet underground, this thing was alive and well despite the amount of poison that I gave it. I called it the Rasputin of plants when I first pulled it out, and this is an absolute confirmation that that is the correct name. The other issue is this entire area right here is rock ledge. And just so you know I'm not kidding, let's give it a listen.
This is all solid, comes down to here, and all this is solid as well. But you'll notice
the final problem is the grade of the yard. The place that I'm standing now is almost a foot higher than that back staircase that you can see over in the distance. Bringing this section of the yard down more is not an option because of all the rock ledge that's below it. So instead, I'm going to have to slowly step up this retaining wall, which does complicate things a bit. And stepping back for a moment, you can see what I'm talking about here. There's a reason the white fence and the stone fence are both at an angle. This entire neighborhood is on a hill, and beneath all of it is that rock ledge that nobody else can get through. Despite these difficulties, I had to carry on because quite frankly I'm stubborn and this needs to get done. But I pulled out my wheelbarrow, I started shoveling the dirt into the wheelbarrow, and that way I could dump it on some of the low sections of this area. I knew that I was going to have to dig this trench and that I was going to use the dirt to fill some of those low sections, so this is me finally getting that chance. And I had to dig this trench wide enough so that it could accommodate not only the wall itself, but also the correct amount of backfill for the gravel and several inches of gravel in the front, which is required per code. Basically, when you got a gravel footing, it has to go down the back of the wall underneath the first layer and then out the front, and that allows the water to flow through and dissipate more readily. But of course, I very quickly hit a stopping point when I discovered something else.
Just as a quick sanity check here, we're going out 24 inches. That'll give us about a foot of backfill of gravel, which is what we planned for. The block itself is 5.5 inches, and then we'll get about a half a foot or so of actual space in the front of more gravel. That way we have a little bit of drainage. Now the problem is that comes out to about here, and as you can hear, that's rock. This bit over here that looks like dirt, that's rock. What about this by my shadow? Also rock. This whole thing is solid, so I'm gonna have to get a little bit creative about how we approach this. The other option is to bring it out this way, but even if we do that, we're still hitting rocks. It really doesn't matter, does it? So as you can tell, I am a little bit sweaty and exhausted and in need of some hydration at this point. So I'm gonna go in, I'm gonna take a few minutes to re-energize. We gotta think this over, otherwise we might be running into some issues, and I don't know necessarily how we're gonna solve that problem.
After taking a few minutes to rest and rehydrate, I decided that solving that problem was not for me today. That was an issue for future Zach, and so I carried on digging the trench for the rest of the distance. Now honestly, once I got out of that corner, it did go a lot smoother. There was still rock ledge, but it wasn't directly below the surface like it was in that one corner. I could at least least get a reasonable amount of depth. There is a certain depth that you're supposed to have of gravel per code. I didn't know how I was going to be able to hit that depth in that corner that was solid rock, because let's be real, I'm not going to be drilling out or cutting that out to try to make this retaining wall. But for the rest of this distance, it was less of an issue, but I'll say still an issue because, well, you know, that's how my luck is. But after a couple more hours of baking in the sun, my glistening body was now caked in sweat and dirt. But that was a pretty solid amount for today, so let's check on our progress.
All right, our freshly leveled yard is now no longer so level, but after about 6 hours and currently 86 degrees, but a high of about 90 today, we have our trench, and everything else that you see here is rock ledge, so we can't go any further down than that. But at least I was able to go as far back as I wanted. I think that's the bigger issue here. And then this, we're just gonna have to spread it later and hope that it doesn't raise up the yard a little bit too much. But in the meantime, you can probably tell I am a little bit covered in dirt. Feel absolutely disgusting. I probably smell bad. I am ready to call it quits and go in for the day. So I think this is a good stopping point for now, and we will resume next time when I have to figure out how to get all of this level so that we can lay down our base layer and get the second layer of the retaining wall started.
So these big jagged rock ledges are clearly going to be an issue. I've got to figure out how I put these nice straight boards over this really choppy, rough, uneven surface. But that was a problem for future me because current me was absolutely done with this. I had zero desire to continue at this point during the day. I was pretty cooked. So that's clearly enough punishment for one day, but I want to thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time.